I got home at 1 in the morning to find the house completely dark. Walking into the kitchen, I was devastated to see my daughter on her knees, on the floor, weeping silently over our old pet bowl. "Where is your stepmother?" I asked, my voice trembling. She whispered, "They took your money and left this afternoon." Right after that, my heart stopped when I saw the bruises on her arms, and what I found in my new wife's room the next morning was far worse than those bruises. Welcome to Dad's Revenge Stories. I'm incredibly grateful to have you here. To help grow our community, comment below with your city or country, so I know where you're watching from. Also note this story blends creative elements for entertainment and educational purposes. Any similarity to actual names or places is coincidental, but the message shared is practical. The key was already in my hand when I stopped at the front door. 30 years of working electrical jobs across New York State had taught me to read a building before I walked into it. The way a house sits in the dark tells you something. A house where people are sleeping still breathes a porch light. Someone left on the faint blue flicker of a television, through a curtain, a lamp upstairs, casting that thin, warm line under a bedroom door. Those are signs of life. Those are signs that someone inside is resting, not gone. Crestwood Avenue was quiet at 1 in the morning. The way October nights in Yonkers get quiet, cold, coming in off the river, leaves skittering across the sidewalk, the distant sound of a truck on the interstate 2 miles east. My neighbors had their porch lights on. The Pattersons at number 11 had their kitchen light burning, the way they always did when their youngest was home from college. My house was the only dark one on the street. Not sleeping dark. Empty dark. The kind of dark that settles into a place when every person who belongs there has either left or been left behind. I stood on the front step for 5 seconds longer than I needed to. Then I unlocked the door and walked in. The smell hit me first, something sour underneath the ordinary smell of a house. Dishes that had been sitting. Garbage that needed taking out. The small accumulated signs of a home where nobody had been paying attention to the details for longer than a few hours. I called out Lily's name once, quietly, because it was 1 in the morning and some part of my brain was still operating on the assumption that there was a reasonable explanation for all of this. Nobody answered. The light was off in the kitchen. I reached for the switch and turned it on. She was on the floor. My daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, was on her knees on the kitchen tile. Her back hunched, her shoulders shaking, with the specific rhythm of someone who has been crying for so long that the tears have gone quiet, and only the shaking remains. In front of her on the floor was a cracked ceramic bowl, the kind we used to put out for the dog we had when Lily was small before Rufus got old and we had to let him go. The bowl still had a chip on the rim from the time Lily dropped it at age 7 and cried for 20 minutes because she thought she was in trouble. The bowl was full of cold leftovers, a few spoonfuls of pasta sauce dried at the edges, the kind of thing you scrape off a plate before you wash it. "Lily." My voice came out wrong, too tight, too high for a man my size. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and dropped to one knee beside her. "Lily, hey, look at me." She flinched when I touched her shoulder. A full-body flinch, the kind that doesn't come from being startled. That kind of flinch comes from somewhere deeper, from a body that has learned to brace itself whenever a hand comes close without warning. When she turned and saw it was me, she made a sound that I am not going to be able to describe properly, because there is no word in the English language for the specific noise a child makes when she has been holding something terrible inside for months, and the person she has been holding it from finally walks through the door. "Dad." Her voice was wrecked. You're not supposed to be back until Friday. Contract got canceled." I pulled her against me and she grabbed the front of my jacket with both fists and pressed her face into my chest. "I'm here. I've got you." "Where's Evelyn?" I asked into the top of her head. Where's Julian? She pulled back just enough to look up at me. Her face was red and swollen, her eyes so swollen from crying that they were nearly closed. They took your credit card, she whispered. They've been at some fancy place downtown since this afternoon. I don't know when they're coming back. Something cold moved through my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something slower and heavier than anger. The specific chill of a man who has been told the weather is fine and just walked outside to find 3 feet of snow. Okay, I said. My voice came out steadier than anything inside me felt. Okay, sweetheart. Let me help you up. That was when I saw her arms. She was wearing a short-sleeved shirt unusual for October, but the kitchen had been warm when the stove was running, and she hadn't expected anyone home. Her left arm was resting against my forearm, and the sleeve had ridden up past her elbow, and I saw the bruises. Not one bruise, not the kind you get from walking into a doorframe or catching your arm on a cabinet corner. A pattern of bruises, some yellowing at the edges, some still purple dark in the center, spread across the inside of her forearm from her wrist to the soft skin at the crook of her elbow. I had been an electrician for 30 years. I knew what accidental damage looked like. I knew what deliberate damage looked like. These were deliberate. Lily. My throat had closed to the width of a wire. Who did this to you? She yanked her sleeve down fast, the automatic movement of someone who had been hiding this for a long time, and forgot just for a moment that she was visible. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes went somewhere else, somewhere internal, and guarded a place she had learned to go when she didn't want to say something out loud. It's nothing, she said. It is not nothing. I kept my hand on her arm gently over the sleeve. Lily, look at me. She looked at me. Her eyes were exhausted in a way that no 16-year-old's eyes should be exhausted, the eyes of someone who had been managing something enormous alone for a very long time. Not tonight, she said. Her voice had gone quiet and careful. Can we just not tonight, Dad? Please. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I nodded. Okay, I said. Not tonight. I helped her up from the floor. I walked her upstairs. I sat on the edge of her bed while she pulled the covers up, and I stayed until her breathing slowed, and I was certain she was asleep. Then I went back downstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I made because I needed something to do with my hands. It went cold before I touched it. The kitchen was quiet around me, the refrigerator humming a branch, tapping the window in the October wind, the ordinary sounds of a house at 2 a.m. I am not a man who does things on impulse. 30 years of electrical work teaches you that the most dangerous thing you can do in a compromised system is react before you understand the full wiring diagram. You pull the wrong wire, you make everything worse. You sit down first. You trace the problem to its source. Then you act. I sat at that table until the sky outside the window started going from black to the gray that comes just before sunrise in October. And I thought about my daughter's eyes. And I thought about that bowl on the floor. And I thought about 30 years of working in other people's buildings and always checking the work before I signed off on it. I had been living in this house for 18 months, and I had not checked the work. That was going to change this morning. The kitchen window faced east, and I watched the sky outside it go from black to the particular gray-purple that comes just before sunrise in October, the color of something not yet decided sitting on the edge of becoming. I had not slept. I had not moved from the kitchen table except to pour a second cup of coffee that went cold the same way the first one did. The house around me was the specific quiet of very early morning, the kind that feels held like the whole world is waiting for permission to start. Diane used to love this hour. She called it the honest hour, the 30 minutes before the day put its armor on, when everything was still soft and unguarded and true. She would come downstairs before 6 with her hair still loose and her reading glasses pushed up on her head and stand at this exact window with her hands wrapped around her mug and just look at the yard without saying anything. Not sad, not worried, just present. I sat at the table now and looked at the chair across from me, the chair where she used to sit. It was still her chair. I had never been able to think of it as anything else. Diane Holt was 24 years old when I met her, and she walked into a job site in Brooklyn on a Tuesday morning in the spring of 1989, wearing a hard hat 2 sizes too big and carrying a clipboard like she was fully prepared to use it as a weapon if necessary. She was the project coordinator for the general contractor, which meant she was responsible for making sure that men like me showed up on time, did the work we were paid to do, and didn't cut corners on the safety specs. She found a corner I had cut on my second day. A junction box I had sealed without running the full continuity test first, because I was 26 years old, and in a hurry and certain that I already knew the outcome. "Run the test," she said. She didn't say it loudly. She didn't need to. "It's fine," I told her. "I've done this 1,000 times. Then running the test takes you 4 minutes and proves you right." She looked at me over the top of her clipboard with brown eyes that had already made up their mind about several things, including me. "Or you don't run it, and I write it up. Your choice, Ray." I ran the test. She was right. There was a fault in the secondary connection that would have caused an arc within 6 months. I asked her to dinner that Friday. She said yes, but only because the job ran over schedule, and she felt she owed me an apology for the extra hours. I knew that was not the real reason. I think she knew I knew. We got married in 1991 at the Yonkers City Hall on a Wednesday afternoon in November with her sister Patricia and my foreman Gerald standing as witnesses, and a dinner afterward at a Greek place on McLean Avenue where the owner kept bringing out extra food because he said we looked like people who were celebrating something worth celebrating. We were. We bought the house on Crestwood Avenue in 1998, paid it off by 2000, 2 years ahead of schedule because Diane kept a spreadsheet tracking every extra payment and recalculated the amortization schedule every 6 months to see how much time we were cutting off. The morning we made the final payment, she sat at this kitchen table and cried in a way I had only seen her cry twice before in our marriage. Big, full, unashamed tears, the kind that have been stored up a long time. "It's ours," she said. "Raymond, it's actually ours." "Has been for 11 years, I said. "No." She shook her head hard. "It's been the bank's for 11 years. Today it's ours." She pressed both palms flat on the kitchen table. "Nobody can take this from us." Lily was born in 2008, and the way Diane became a mother was the same way she did everything completely without reservation, with a level of preparation that made everyone around her feel both impressed and slightly inadequate. She had read 4 books on child development before Lily was 3 months old. She had opinions about schools before Lily could walk. She had a college savings account, a 529 plan, which in the United States allows parents to invest money specifically for a child's education, with significant tax advantages set up and funded before Lily's first birthday. $22,000, she told me once late on a Tuesday night, showing me the account balance on her laptop. "That's where we are. I want to get it to 60 before she graduates high school." "She's 7, I said. "Which means we have 11 years. Diane looked at me over her reading glasses. "That's the point, Ray. You start before you need it." That was Diane. Always building. Always thinking 10 steps ahead quietly without fanfare, without needing anyone to notice. The last real conversation we had was on a Tuesday in March of 2021. She was having a better day, not a good day, but better than the days before it, and she asked me to sit with her on the edge of the bed, the way we used to sit when we were first married, and didn't have chairs worth sitting in yet. She reached into the drawer of her nightstand and brought out a watch. Small silver, the kind that pins to a lapel or loops on a delicate chain. It had belonged to her grandmother and her grandmother's mother before that. And Diane had worn it every day for the first 5 years we were together, before she decided it was too precious to risk on a job site. "Give this to Lily," she said. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. Her grip was weaker than it used to be. Her eyes were exactly the same as the day she told me to run the continuity test. "Not now. She's not ready yet. But you'll know when." "Diane." "You'll know," she said. "You always know the right time for things, Ray. It's one of the things about you that I have never once doubted." She let out a long breath and leaned back against the pillow. "Tell me about the last job. The one in Westchester." So I talked about the job. The old Victorian on a dead-end street in Tarrytown, where the original knob and tube wiring was still running through walls that hadn't been opened since 1947. I talked until her breathing went slow and even, and I knew she was asleep. She died 4 days later on a Saturday morning, with Lily and me on either side of the bed, and the March light coming gray and quiet through the curtains. I put the watch in her jewelry box that same afternoon. I checked on it every few weeks the first year, opening the box just to see it there, to know it was waiting, the way Diane had asked. It was still there when Evelyn Marsh walked into my life. I thought about that now, sitting at the kitchen table with the cold coffee and the October dawn coming slow through the window. I thought about Diane's hands pressing the watch into my palm. I thought about what she had said. "You'll know when." I stood up from the table. The sky outside was fully light now, pale and cold and clear, the kind of October morning that doesn't apologize for what it is. I had been ignoring things in this house for a long time. Starting right now, I was going to stop. I did not know when I walked into that community fundraiser on a Saturday evening in July of 2022 that my name had already been written down, not figuratively. Literally written down in neat, small, confident handwriting in a column beside 6 other names in a black notebook that I would not find for another 2 years. By the time Evelyn Marsh smiled at me across a crowded room in the basement of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church on Warburton Avenue, her mother had already spent 14 months studying me from a distance. I need to back up. Because to understand what happened that July evening, you need to understand what the 14 months before it looked like from the outside. Diane died in March of 2021. The weeks after that are not something I can describe in sequence because they did not happen in sequence. They happened in pieces: the funeral, the paperwork, the casseroles that neighbors left on the front step, the school calling to tell me that Lily had cried in the bathroom between second and third period, and a counselor had sat with her for 40 minutes. I went back to work after 6 weeks because the bills required it, and because sitting in the house alone during the day was something I could not do and still function. I was not in good shape. I knew I was not in good shape. I was eating badly, sleeping poorly, working longer hours than I should have been, and coming home to a house that still smelled like Diane's shampoo when I opened the bathroom cabinet and still had her reading glasses on the nightstand because I could not make myself put them away. I was managing. I was not living. That is what Beatrice Marsh saw when she identified me as a target. I only learned this later, pieced together from what Frank found in the notebook, what the investigators confirmed, what a 78-year-old woman in Tennessee told a lawyer while sitting at her kitchen table recognizing handwriting she had last seen on grocery lists left by someone she had trusted completely. Beatrice had a system. She had been running variations of it for years. She looked for specific things: a man alone with assets and no debt, with no family close enough to ask hard questions, distracted enough by grief or loneliness to stop checking the work. My name, according to the notebook, came to Evelyn's attention 2 months after Diane's funeral. She had sources, people who passed along information without understanding what they were passing it to. Beatrice helped work those sources. But the notebook was Evelyn's. The handwriting was Evelyn's. The word manageable next to my name was written in Evelyn's hand. House paid off, truck paid off, good steady income, one teenage daughter, no brothers or sisters nearby. The word she wrote next to my name was manageable. Not a target, not a victim. Manageable. Like a circuit that could be controlled if you knew where the breaker was. Evelyn had prepared herself. That is the word I keep coming back to. Not trained by someone else, not instructed, self-prepared. The way a contractor prepares a surface before the work goes on, methodical, patient, nothing left to chance. Beatrice had done this kind of thing before in smaller ways, and Evelyn had watched and learned. But what happened on Crestwood Avenue was Evelyn's design, her target, her timeline. She knew I had driven a truck briefly in my 20s before settling into electrical work, and that I still sometimes missed the road. She knew that Diane and I had met on a job site, that I respected competence, that I was not impressed by people who performed effort without delivering results. She had done her homework. The fundraiser was for the Yonkers Family Resource Center, an organization that provided after-school programs and emergency assistance for families in the area. I went because Bob Garrett from across the street had asked me to come, and because Lily was spending the weekend with her school friend 2 blocks over, and because staying home alone on a Saturday evening had started to feel like a choice I was making against myself. I was at the drinks table pouring myself a cup of coffee that turned out to be weak and lukewarm when she appeared beside me. "The coffee's terrible," she said. Not as a complaint. As a statement of fact offered to a stranger, as a small gift of honesty. "I should have warned you." I looked at her. Mid-30s dark hair pulled back, the kind of put-together that looked natural rather than assembled. She was holding a glass of water and looking at the coffee urn with an expression of mild, genuine regret. "I've had worse," I said. "Where?" She tilted her head slightly. "Curious. Not performing curiosity, actually curious, or so it seemed." "Truck stops off I-87 at 3 in the morning," I said. "Coffee so old it had its own weather system." She laughed. A real laugh, short and unguarded, and she looked at me differently after it, the way people look at you when you have said something that caught them off guard in a good way. "You drove trucks years ago, before I got my electrical license. My uncle drove long haul out of Buffalo for 20 years, she said. "He always said the road teaches you things that nothing else can." She paused. "I'm Evelyn." "Raymond," I said. "Ray." We talked for 40 minutes. She asked good questions, the kind that showed she had been listening to the answer before she asked the next one, building on what I had already said rather than waiting for her turn to speak. She asked about the electrical work, about what it was like to troubleshoot a problem in a building that nobody had touched the wiring in for 60 years. She asked about Yonkers, about the neighborhood, about whether I had grown up here or arrived later. She did not ask about Diane. She did not ask if I was married. She let me be whoever I was in that room without pressing on anything that might have been tender. I drove home that evening thinking that was a woman who knew how to listen. That was a woman who paid attention. I was right about both of those things. What I did not understand, what I could not have understood that night, standing in a church basement with a cup of bad coffee going cold in my hand, was the reason she was so good at it. The listening, the questions, the careful attention to detail. I thought it was character. I thought it was just who she was. It was a skill, practiced and refined and pointed directly at me. Evelyn went home that night and called her mother. I know this because Frank found the call records. 14 minutes. I can imagine what was said on Beatrice's end of that conversation, though I will never know the exact words. What I know is that 3 days later, Evelyn appeared at the hardware store on South Broadway, where I stopped every Tuesday morning for supplies. She seemed surprised to see me. She was very good at seeming surprised. My sister Melissa drove down from Albany the first time she met Evelyn, which should have told me something. Melissa did not drive 2.5 hours for ordinary things. She drove 2.5 hours for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for the weekend, after Diane's funeral, when she showed up at the front door at 7 in the morning with 2 bags of groceries and stayed for 4 days without being asked. Melissa was the kind of woman who saved her effort for things that mattered and did not waste it on anything else. When she called me on a Tuesday evening in November of 2022 and said she wanted to come down that Saturday to have dinner with me and Evelyn, I felt something shift very slightly in my chest. "You don't have to make the drive," I told her. "I want to meet her," Melissa said. Her voice was even. Too even, the way a voice gets when someone is working to keep it that way. "You've been seeing this woman for 4 months, Ray. I want to meet her." Dinner was at the house. I cooked pot roast the way our mother used to make it, with carrots and potatoes, and the kind of gravy that takes the better part of an afternoon to get right. Evelyn arrived 20 minutes early with a bottle of red wine and a warmth that filled the kitchen the moment she walked in, asking Melissa questions about Albany, about her work as a physical therapist, about how long the drive had taken, and whether the thruway had been backed up near the toll plaza at Harriman, the way it always was on weekends. Melissa answered every question. She was polite. She was gracious. She passed the bread and complimented the wine and laughed at the right moments. She called me the next morning at 7:30. "Ray," she said without preamble, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without getting defensive." "Good morning to you too, Mel. I mean it." Her voice was tight and serious in a way that made me set down my coffee cup. Something is off with that woman. I cannot tell you exactly what it is. It's the way she asks questions, not to learn the answers, but to find out where the edges are. Do you know what I mean? Like she's mapping the room. I sat with that for a moment. "She's naturally curious," I said. "She's interested in people, Ray." Melissa's voice dropped. "She spent 45 minutes asking me about our family, who we're close to, where everyone lives, whether we see each other often. She asked if Mom and Dad were still alive. She asked if you had cousins nearby." A pause. She wasn't making conversation. She was taking inventory. I wanted to hear what Melissa was telling me. I want to be honest about that. I did not dismiss it instantly or without thought. I sat at the kitchen table, and I turned it over in my mind, and I tried to look at the dinner from the outside, the way you step back from a wiring job, and look at the whole panel before you touch anything. But I was also 57 years old, and I had been alone for 18 months, and Evelyn made me feel for the first time since Diane died, like someone in the world was paying attention to me. That is not an excuse. It is just the truth about where I was standing when Melissa gave me the warning. "I think you're reading into it," I said. Melissa was quiet for 5 seconds. "Okay," she said. Just that one word, flat and final, the sound of a door being closed gently by someone who knows better than to slam it. "You know where I am if you need me." 3 weeks later, Evelyn mentioned in the careful offhand way she mentioned things she wanted me to agree to that Melissa seemed like she might be having a hard time adjusting to the idea of me moving forward. That it was natural for siblings to feel protective. That she didn't take it personally, but she wanted me to know that she had felt a certain distance from Melissa that evening, and she hoped it wouldn't become a problem. I told her not to worry about it. I did not call Melissa and tell her what Evelyn had said. I should have. Looking back, I understand that the moment I accepted Evelyn's version of my sister's behavior over Melissa's own words, something important had already been shifted in me quietly and without my noticing. We got married in April of 2023. Small ceremony, the backyard of a friend's house in Hastings-on-Hudson. 20 people, a cake Evelyn had ordered from a bakery in Bronxville that was genuinely the best cake I had eaten since our wedding in 1991. Lily stood next to me in a blue dress and shook Evelyn's hand at the reception with the careful, deliberate politeness of someone completing a transaction they had not been consulted about. I noticed it. I filed it under teenagers being territorial and moved on. Melissa came. She hugged me at the end of the evening and held on for a second longer than usual. "You know where I am," she said into my shoulder. The same thing she had said on the phone 5 months earlier. I squeezed her back and told her to drive safe. What I did not see, because I was not looking for it, was the moment just before Melissa let go of me, when she looked over my shoulder at Evelyn, who was standing near the cake table talking to one of my colleagues. And the look on Evelyn's face in that moment, which Melissa told me about much later, sitting in my kitchen on a night in October, when she had driven down from Albany again this time, because I had called her at 9 in the evening and told her what I had found. "She was watching us," Melissa said. "The whole time I was hugging you, she was watching us. And when I looked up and caught her eye, she smiled. But it was the wrong kind of smile, Ray. It was the smile of someone who has already won something." 3 weeks after the wedding, Evelyn came to me on a Sunday evening with her voice soft and her reasoning airtight. Julian needed stability. He had been through a lot of transitions. The apartment where they had been staying was month to month, and the landlord had given notice. It would only be temporary, just until they found the right place. I thought about the 2 empty bedrooms upstairs. I thought about Lily, who had said nothing about any of this beyond a single quiet observation at breakfast that morning. So Julian's moving in. Not a question. A statement of something she already knew and had already decided how to feel about. "Just temporarily," I told her. She nodded and ate her toast and did not say anything else. I told myself she was adjusting. I told myself it would take time. I told myself that blended families were complicated, and that the difficult part was always the beginning, and that things would find their level once everyone settled in. I was wrong about all of it. But I did not know that yet on the Sunday evening when Julian Marsh carried 2 duffel bags and a backpack through my front door and stood in the entryway looking at the house the way someone looks at a place they intend to stay in for longer than anyone has been told. They did not take over the house in a day. That is the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that sits in my chest like a loose wire I cannot quite locate. Not the cruelty itself, but the patience of it. The deliberateness. A fast takeover leaves marks, leaves resistance, leaves a record of the moment things changed. What they built was something different. They built it slowly, the way water builds pressure inside a sealed pipe, invisible, gradual, and then all at once catastrophic. The first month after Julian moved in, everything was careful and considered. Evelyn cooked dinner 3 nights a week, real meals, the kind that take time, pot roast and roasted chicken, and a lasagna that Julian carried to the table with both hands, like he was presenting something ceremonial. Beatrice came over on Sundays. That was when I first saw her in person, and I want to describe her accurately because I got her wrong for a long time. Beatrice Marsh was 63 years old, and she looked like someone's favorite grandmother, silver haircut, short and practical reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, the kind of unhurried warmth that made you feel when she turned it on you, like you were the most important person in the room. She brought things. Pie once. A plant for the kitchen windowsill another time. She remembered that I took my coffee black and produced a mug for me without asking every single Sunday with the quiet attentiveness of someone who had spent years making people feel looked after. "You work too hard," she told me one evening, setting the mug in front of me with both hands. "A man your age out on those job sites all week. You need people around you." "I'm fine," I said. "Of course you are." She smiled, warm, patient, precisely calibrated. "But fine isn't the same as cared for, is it, Raymond?" I drank the coffee and told her she was right. I did not understand then that she was filing everything I said. Every preference, every soft spot, every place where a decent man's defenses could be located and noted for later use. The app appeared on my phone sometime in August. I only know the approximate timing because that was when Frank's investigators found the installation record buried in my phone's data logs, a piece of software called Family Track, installed without my knowledge or consent. Evelyn had taken my phone from the kitchen counter one evening while I was in the backyard checking the exterior outlet. Beatrice was there that evening too, and I could not say with certainty whose hands had held the phone. What I know is that it was Evelyn's account the data was transmitting to. After that, they always knew when I was coming home. Julian's position was the front window of his bedroom, which faced Crestwood Avenue directly. The moment my truck turned onto the street, my truck was not difficult to identify, a white Ford F250 with the Holt Electrical logo on the driver's door. That I had been driving for 6 years, he sent a text to Evelyn's phone. One word: coming. What happened in the 4 minutes between that text and my key in the front door was something I reconstructed, later piece by piece from what Lily told me, and what Bob Garrett had seen through his front window on more occasions than I knew. The television went to something wholesome. The kitchen was straightened. Lily, wherever she was, whatever she had been doing, whatever she had been eating or not eating, was repositioned. At the table with a plate with a glass of water in the posture of a child who belonged there. 4 minutes. That was all the margin they needed. I walked in every time and saw a family at dinner. I told myself it was working. I told myself the difficult beginning was giving way to something steadier. The app on my phone meant there were no accidents, no unexpected returns, no moments when the performance was not ready. I went on a 3-day job in White Plains in September and called home each evening and heard Evelyn's voice, easy and warm, telling me everything was fine. Lily was doing her homework. Julian had made the junior varsity basketball team. Wasn't that something? I said yes, that was something. I asked to speak to Lily. There was always a reason she was in the shower. She was already asleep. She had just stepped out with a friend. I accepted every reason, every single one. Evelyn handled the neighborhood during that same period. I learned this later from Bob, from 2 other neighbors who came forward who, after the story got out, from Helen Patterson at number 11, who told Frank's investigator that she had been told by a very concerned woman, Evelyn, warm and credible and entirely convincing, that the teenage girl at the Holt house had a history of making things up. Beatrice helped carry the message to neighbors she knew, but the story originated with Evelyn, that she had been struggling since her mother died, that the family was doing everything they could, but it was important not to encourage her stories. Helen Patterson had believed it. She was a decent woman who had no reason not to. Melissa called me in October, the second time she tried to tell me something was wrong. She had driven down to drop off a birthday gift for Lily and had stopped by the house unannounced. Evelyn had answered the door. Melissa had not been invited in. Lily, Evelyn explained, was resting. She looked thin, Ray. Melissa told me on the phone that evening. Really thin, and she didn't come to the door. She's been tired, I said. I was repeating something Evelyn had told me. I did not realize I was repeating it. Teenagers go through phases. Melissa was quiet for 3 seconds. Okay, she said. The same flat, final syllable she had used in November of the previous year. The sound of someone who has offered what they have and has decided not to fight the wall they keep running into. I told myself she was worrying too much. I drove home that Friday and pulled onto Crestwood Avenue and saw the lights on in the kitchen and the silhouette of Evelyn moving past the window, and I felt the specific relief of a man returning to something that feels like warmth. I parked the truck. I walked to the front door. I put my key in the lock. In the front bedroom upstairs, Julian put his phone face down on his desk. He had sent the text 11 minutes ago. Everything was ready. I want to tell you about a normal day in my daughter's life. Not the worst day. Not the day I found her on the kitchen floor. Just a regular, ordinary Tuesday in November kind of day. The kind that left no single mark large enough to point to, but accumulated day after day into something that nearly broke her completely. I am telling it the way Lily told it to me slowly, over several weeks, in pieces the way you dismantle something that has been under pressure for a long time and has to be taken apart carefully, or it will take you with it. I am telling it in her words, where I remember them, and in my own words, where I have to fill the space she could not yet reach. She woke up at 4 in the morning. Not because she wanted to. Not because she had somewhere to be. She woke up at 4 because Julian knocked on her bedroom door at 4, 2 sharp knocks, the way you knock on a door when you are not asking permission but announcing a requirement. Lily told me she had learned within the first 3 weeks that the consequences of not waking up at 4 were worse than the consequences of waking up. She did not explain what those consequences were in detail. Her jaw went tight when she got to that part, and I did not push. She went downstairs in the dark. The kitchen was cold because Evelyn kept the thermostat at 62 overnight. Comfortable enough for people sleeping under blankets, not comfortable enough for a 16-year-old girl scrubbing a kitchen floor on her hands and knees at 4:15 in the morning. She mopped the floors first, then the bathrooms, both of them, the one in the hall and the one off the master bedroom that was Evelyn's, which had to be cleaned to a standard that Lily described as perfect, which meant whatever she decided perfect was that morning. Evelyn conducted the inspections herself twice a week, running a finger along the top of the baseboards, checking the grout lines in the bathroom tile, holding a glass from the cabinet up to the light to check for water spots. Beatrice joined her on some of those mornings, standing in the doorway, saying nothing. But it was Evelyn's voice that narrated while Lily worked, speaking about her in the third person, loud enough for Lily to hear from 3 feet away. The girl missed a spot behind the toilet again. She would say, her voice carrying the specific disappointment of someone describing a malfunctioning appliance. You need to show her again. She doesn't retain instruction well. Lily told me she had stopped responding to these comments by November. Not because she had stopped feeling them, but because she had learned that any response, correction, defense, even silence that looked too deliberate, would result in the task being assigned again from the beginning. She cooked breakfast for Evelyn and Julian at 6:30. Eggs, toast, sometimes bacon on weekends. Julian ate at the kitchen table. Evelyn ate at the kitchen table. Lily ate standing at the counter by the back door, with whatever was left, which was sometimes enough and sometimes not. She told me this with the flat, factual voice of someone reporting weather data, not asking for sympathy, just stating what the conditions had been. The table is for family, Evelyn had told her once early on when Lily had pulled out her own chair without thinking. Lily did not pull out her own chair again after that. She went to school exhausted. Carol Simmons, Lily's English teacher and homeroom supervisor at Roosevelt High School, a woman in her mid-40s, who had been teaching in Yonkers for 17 years, noticed the change by October of 2023, 6 weeks after the school year started. She told Frank's investigator later that Lily had been one of her sharpest students the previous year. Engaged, curious, the kind of kid who stayed after class to argue about a book's ending because she had thoughts that wouldn't fit in the time allotted. By October, she was falling asleep at her desk. Carol called the house 3 times over the following months. Evelyn answered all 3 calls. She was warm, she was concerned, she was grateful that the school was paying attention. She explained that Lily was going through a difficult period of adjustment, following the loss of her mother, that the family was working with a professional, that these things took time. She used the right words, grief response, processing therapeutic support, with the fluency of someone who had prepared for exactly this conversation. The professional she mentioned did not exist. The therapeutic support was a man named Dr. Gerald Ames, whose office was in a strip mall in Mount Vernon, whose website listed a PhD in counseling psychology from an unaccredited online institution, and who was not licensed to practice psychology in the state of New York. Evelyn had found him herself through a contact she had used before for documentation purposes. He charged $120 per session and provided whatever documentation was requested. He gave Lily 3 sessions and produced a 2-page assessment that described her as displaying attention-seeking behavioral patterns, a tendency toward narrative embellishment, and difficulty distinguishing between perceived and actual experiences. Evelyn showed Lily the assessment on a Tuesday evening in January of 2024. She set it on the kitchen counter, smoothed it flat with her palm, and said without raising her voice, "If you tell your father anything, this is what the record says about you. Do you understand what that means?" Lily told me she had understood exactly what it meant. Her phone had been taken in December, confiscated, Evelyn said, because Lily had been too distracted at home. The real phone, the one her school friend had slipped her through the bathroom window at Roosevelt one afternoon in February, was hidden behind the stock pots in the lower kitchen cabinet under a dish towel. On it, she had been documenting everything she could: timestamps, descriptions, one video 38 seconds long that she had shot from below the cabinet level with the phone balanced on the kitchen floor. She had not sent any of it to me. She had not asked me for help. She had instead typed a note to herself in the caption field below the video, 7 words that I am going to carry with me for the rest of my life, in case Dad doesn't believe me. She was 16 years old, and she had watched me take Evelyn's word over hers often enough, and heard her own documented psychological profile used as a weapon against her credibility often enough that she had concluded the only safe thing to do was build a case alone in the dark and wait. That is the part I have the hardest time saying out loud. Not what they did to her. What she believed about me. In February of 2024, I did the worst thing a father can do. I am not going to soften that or find a more forgiving way to say it. I had a conversation with my daughter in which she tried to tell me the truth, and I did not listen. I had the evidence of her own voice and her own face in front of me, and I chose the version of events that required less of me. That is what happened. I have not found a way to make it smaller than it is, and I have stopped trying. It was a Wednesday. I had been on a job in Tarrytown for 3 days, rewiring the basement and first floor of a commercial building that had flooded the previous fall, the kind of methodical work that leaves you physically tired in a way that goes all the way down to the joints. I was on the Sawmill River Parkway, heading south, when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Evelyn's name on the screen. I picked up on the second ring. "Hey, I'm about an hour out. Ray." Her voice had the controlled tightness of someone managing a situation. "I need to show you something when you get home. Something happened this afternoon." My hands went tighter on the wheel. "Is everyone okay?" "Julian is shaken up," she said. "He's okay, but he's shaken up. I'm going to send you something. I wanted you to see it before you got home so you had a moment to process it." The video came through 30 seconds later, 11 seconds long. The angle was from Julian's phone, slightly high, the angle of someone holding a phone at chest level, which in a teenage boy means roughly 4.5 feet off the ground. The The kitchen. Afternoon light. And Lily, with her back to the camera, turning around and shoving Julian hard enough that he stumbled backward 2 full steps into the kitchen counter. That was the whole video. 11 seconds, beginning to end. I watched it twice on the shoulder of the sawmill hazard lights, blinking trucks going past in the left lane. My chest felt like something had been tightened around it from the outside. I called Evelyn back. What happened before that? He said they were arguing about the television, she said. He wanted to watch something, and she told him he couldn't, and it escalated. Ray, this isn't the first time she's put her hands on him. I have been trying to handle it without making it into a bigger thing, but I'll talk to her, I said. I know you will, Evelyn said. And her voice dropped into something softer, something that sounded like reluctant honesty. I just worry about her, Ray. I don't think she's okay. I think she's still carrying so much from losing her mom, and it's coming out sideways. I sat with that the rest of the drive home. I turned it over the way I turn over a problem on a job site, looking for the explanation that accounts for all the evidence. A grieving teenager. Behavioral issues. A stepbrother she had not chosen and had not been consulted about. It was not complicated, I told myself. It was sad, and it was manageable, and I would handle it. What I did not ask myself, what I am ashamed to admit, I did not ask myself until much later, was what had happened in the kitchen before the 3rd second of that video. Lily was in her room when I got home. I knocked twice and opened the door. She was sitting at her desk with a textbook open in front of her, and when she looked up and saw my face, something moved behind her eyes, a quick internal adjustment, like a person bracing for weather. They have already learned to read. Come downstairs, I said. I want to talk to you. She came downstairs. She sat at the kitchen table across from me. I put my phone on the table between us with the video pulled up, and I watched her look at it. Her face did something complicated. Something that I read at the time as guilt, the particular stillness of someone caught at something they wish they hadn't done. What I understand now, looking back with everything I know, is that it was not guilt. It was the expression of someone who has just seen a trap spring and is deciding in real time whether there is any point in trying to explain their way out of it. That's not what happened, she said. Her voice was steady and quiet. Too quiet with the specific flatness of someone who has already done the math on being believed. I can see what happened, I said. I heard myself saying it. I knew even as I said it that I sounded like a man who had already decided which was exactly what I was. He blocked the... She stopped. Started again. Julian was standing in front of the refrigerator, and he wouldn't move when I asked him to, and then he got in my face and called me. She stopped again. Her jaw went tight in the way it went tight when she was fighting to keep her voice level. He started it, Dad. He starts things, and then he records the end of them. That's what he does. Lily. My voice came out harder than I intended. She looked at me. Directly, steadily, with the eyes of someone who has arrived at a decision they have been working toward for a long time. Then she nodded once, a single deliberate nod, and she said, Okay, Dad. Not you're right. Not I'm sorry. Just okay. The word of someone who has understood something and filed it away. We don't put our hands on people in this house, I said. I don't care what someone says to you. You walk away. Okay, she said again. Are we clear? Yes. She stood up from the table, picked up her textbook, and went back upstairs. Her footsteps on the stairs were even and unhurried. At the top, she turned left toward her bedroom. The door closed with a soft, precise click, the sound of someone who has learned that slamming a door is a luxury they cannot afford. I sat at the kitchen table for a few minutes after that, with the phone face down and the specific discomfort of a man who has handled something and is not quite sure he handled it right. But I told myself she needed the boundary. I told myself consistency was important. I told myself that parenting a grieving teenager meant holding the line even when it was hard. Evelyn came into the kitchen and put her hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. I nodded. From upstairs, there was no sound at all. No crying, no music, no creak of the desk chair or the specific footstep pattern of someone pacing the way Lily did when she was upset. Just silence, complete and deliberate, the silence of a person who has gone somewhere inside themselves, where the outside world no longer had reliable access. That silence was the thing I should have walked upstairs and broken. I know that now. I did not know it then. I told myself she needed time. I poured a glass of water and drank it at the kitchen counter and went to bed at 9:30 because I had another early start in Tarrytown. And my daughter lay in her room with the hidden phone under her mattress and the video she had taken 3 weeks earlier and the note she had typed to herself, and she made a decision that I would not fully understand until much later. She decided to stop trying. There are 2 moments in this story that stop my breath when I think about them. Not the night I found Lily on the kitchen floor. That moment broke something open in me, but by then, the worst of the damage had already been done, and I was at least present for it. The 2 moments I am talking about are the ones where everything could have gone permanently, irreversibly wrong, and I did not see it coming until I was already inside them. The first was a Tuesday evening in March of 2024. I had been on a job in the Bronx for 4 days, a full rewire on a 6-unit apartment building in Riverdale, the kind of job that requires you to work with the building occupied, which means careful scheduling, constant communication with residents, and the specific mental exhaustion of managing other people's anxiety about their electricity while also doing the technical work. I came home at 6:30 with sore hands and an empty stomach, and the particular tunnel vision of someone who needs dinner and a chair and not very much else. Evelyn had dinner on the table. That was the thing about the early months. She was very good at having dinner on the table. Roasted chicken green beans, the kind of meal that lands exactly right when you are tired and hungry and grateful for something ordinary. I sat down without washing my hands first, which I almost never do, which tells you something about the state I was in. We ate. Lily was in her room. She had been eating in her room more often lately. Evelyn explained, teenage need for space. Nothing to worry about. I accepted this the way I had been accepting things for months, which is to say, without looking directly at it. After dinner, Evelyn cleared the plates and came back to the table with a single sheet of paper and set it in front of me with the unhurried ease of someone placing something entirely routine. "What's this?" I asked. "A durable power of attorney," she said, and she sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. In the state of New York, a durable power of attorney is a legal document that grants another person, called the agent, broad authority to make financial decisions on the principal's behalf. This can include signing checks, accessing bank accounts, managing property, and making contracts. It remains valid even if the principal becomes incapacitated. It is one of the most consequential legal documents a person can sign. "It just makes things easier while you're on the road," she said. "Right now, if something comes up with the house, a repair, an insurance issue, anything, I have to wait for you to call back. Sometimes the window is tight. This way I can handle things without bothering you." It sounded reasonable. She had a gift for making things sound reasonable. "I'll have my lawyer look at it," I said. "Of course." She smiled, easy, unhurried. "It's just a quality of life thing. No rush." I picked up the pen from where it was sitting beside the paper. Evelyn had placed it there when she set the document down, which I noticed without registering as significant. I turned the paper toward me and looked at the signature line. My phone rang. Marcus Webb. The name came up on the screen. Marcus, who I had worked alongside for 11 years. Marcus, who called me maybe 4 times a year, and never in the evening. I looked at the screen, looked at the pen in my hand, and stood up from the table. "I have to take this," I said. "Of course," Evelyn said again. I walked into the hallway. Marcus had a question about a commercial job we were both bidding details, timeline nothing urgent. We talked for 9 minutes. When I came back to the kitchen, the table was cleared. The paper was gone. The pen was gone. Evelyn was at the sink with her back to me. "We can do it another time," she said. "When you're not tired." "Sure," I said. I poured a glass of water and went to bed, and did not think about the document again for 7 months. What I know now and did not know then is that putting that pen down on that table was the single luckiest thing that happened to me in 2 years. If Marcus Webb had not called at that exact moment, if I had signed that document on a Tuesday evening in March, while I was tired and hungry, and not paying attention, everything that came after would have been different. Everything. I do not know how to sit with that. Some nights I still cannot. The second moment was the evening of October 14th. Lily's 16th birthday. I was on a job in Scarsdale and could not get home. I had called that morning. Evelyn answered, said Lily was still asleep. I should call back later. I called back at noon. Voicemail. I left a message. I sent a text at 3 in the afternoon. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Love, Dad." The message showed as delivered. It did not show as read. I told myself she was having fun with friends. I told myself 16 was an age when a girl did not necessarily want to spend her birthday waiting by the phone for her father. Across the street from my house at number 14 Crestwood Avenue, Bob Garrett was sitting at his front window with a camera he had bought specifically for this purpose, a mid-range digital camera with a decent zoom lens, the kind a retired man buys when he has decided to stop looking away from something he has been watching for months. Bob had been a patrol officer with the NYPD for 22 years before his knees gave out, and he took his pension and moved to Yonkers to be near his daughter, who had since moved to Connecticut, leaving Bob alone in a house that was too large for one person, with too many windows facing a street. He watched more carefully than his neighbors knew. He had been photographing what he saw for 10 months. He had 46 photographs before October 14th. On the evening of Lily's birthday, he took the 47th. Inside the house, through the kitchen window, the light was warm and yellow, the specific glow of a kitchen where people are gathered and comfortable. Evelyn stood near the counter. Julian sat at the table with a fork in his hand. There was a cake white with blue frosting, the kind from a grocery store bakery, the candles already lit. Outside on the front path, Lily stood with her arms crossed over her chest against the October cold. She was in a light jacket, not warm enough for the temperature, which had dropped to 44 degrees by 7 in the evening. She was looking through the kitchen window at the cake and the people around it and the warm yellow light. Bob Garrett raised his camera and took the photograph. Then he set the camera down and looked at the timestamp on the image. He picked up a blue ballpoint pen and wrote on the back of the photograph in his careful, even handwriting, October 14th. Lily's birthday. She stood there 9 minutes. I was in a motel in Scarsdale when my text finally showed as read at 9:47 that night. There was no reply. I set the phone on the nightstand and turned off the lamp and lay in the dark and told myself she was probably just tired. She was standing outside in 44 degrees, looking through a window at a birthday cake that was not for her. I did not know that yet, but I was about to start finding out. The contract cancellation came through at 4:17 in the afternoon. I was on the roof of a 3-story commercial building in Scarsdale, running conduit along the parapet wall, when my phone buzzed in my breast pocket. The project manager, a man named Dennis Cole, who had been managing commercial construction in Westchester for 15 years, and had the specific communication style of someone who delivered bad news the same way he delivered good news, which was to say quickly and without editorializing, called to tell me that the building owner had decided to pause the project pending a financing review, effective immediately. He was sorry for the short notice. He would be in touch about rescheduling. I thanked him, hung up, and sat down on an upturned bucket for a moment. I had planned to be in Scarsdale through Friday. It was Wednesday afternoon. The job ending early meant I could be home by midnight if I packed up now, or I could get a full night's sleep at the motel and drive back Thursday morning. I thought about the text message I had sent Lily the previous evening, the one that had not been read until 9:47 at night and had not been answered at all. I started packing up. Here is the thing about my truck, it is not subtle. A white Ford F-250 with Holt Electrical licensed and insured, lettered on both doors in blue, does not blend into a residential street, and Crestwood Avenue is 430 feet long, with a slight left curve at the midpoint. That means anyone at the front window of the houses on the east side has a clear sightline to the entrance of the street from about 200 feet out. Julian's bedroom faced east. I had parked in the same spot in front of my own house for 6 years. He could have identified my truck from his window in under 3 seconds. What he could not do on the night of October 15th was receive the warning from the app on my phone. I had turned off cellular data that morning, a habit I had developed on long jobs to preserve battery life when I was working in areas with poor signal and could not afford to have my phone die mid-job. It was not a decision I made for any strategic reason. It was 30 years of work habits operating on their own, the same way I always double-checked the breaker before I touched a wire, the same way I always signed a job sheet before I left a site. Routine. Unremarkable. And on that particular night, the single thing that broke their system completely. The app on my phone tried to send my location to Evelyn's monitoring account at 4:19, 2 minutes after I took the call from Dennis Cole. The data packet could not go out. It queued. It sat in the phone's outbox, waiting for a signal that did not come while I loaded my tools into the truck bed and settled my account at the motel and drove south on the Sawmill River Parkway, with the radio off and the windows cracked, and the particular quality of silence that settles into a truck cab when a man has been on the road a long time and is going home. I crossed into Yonkers at 12:41 in the morning. Crestwood Avenue was the kind of quiet it gets after midnight in October. The deep, settled quiet of a street where everyone who belongs there is inside, where the only sounds are the wind in the oak trees and the occasional distant bark of a dog and the particular rustle of leaves that have just let go and haven't landed yet. I turned onto the street and saw my house at the far end and felt for one suspended moment the ordinary relief of a man coming home. Then I registered the dark, not the expected dark of a house where people are sleeping. I have come home late enough times to know what that looks like. A porch light left on the blue-gray glow of a television. Someone fell asleep watching a bathroom light upstairs, because Lily always left the bathroom light on one when she woke up for her terms in the night. This was different. This was the closed-up, sealed-in dark of a house that had been emptied out for hours and not returned to. I parked. I sat in the truck for 60 seconds with the engine off, the way I sometimes sit at the start of a complicated job, before I open the panel just to make sure I am thinking clearly before I start touching things. Then I got out. The front door opened without resistance. I had not double-locked it when I left on Monday morning. Another habit. Another unremarkable routine that turned out to matter. I stepped into the front hallway and stood still, listening. The refrigerator was running in the kitchen. The furnace clicked on and off in the basement. The house made the sounds houses make when they are empty. I walked to the kitchen and turned on the light. What I saw when I turned on that light is something I have already told you, but I want to tell it again, because the first time I told it in the middle of everything else, and it deserves its own space. My daughter was on the floor, not sitting, not resting. On her knees, her back curved forward, her shoulders shaking with the rhythm of someone who had been crying for a very long time and had gone past the point where crying makes noise. The bowl in front of her was the cracked ceramic dog bowl that had belonged to Rufus, our old yellow lab, who had lived to 14 and been the gentlest animal I had ever known, and the food in it was cold pasta with sauce dried around the edges, and something that might have been a chicken leg, and my daughter was eating from it on the kitchen floor at 1 in the morning. I said her name. She flinched the full-body flinch I have already described, the one that does not come from surprise. I crossed the kitchen and dropped to one knee, and she turned and saw my face and made that sound, that specific particular sound that I will carry with me until I die. The sound of something that has been held in an enclosed space for far too long finally being given room. We stayed like that for a while. Her fists in my jacket, my chin on top of her head. Neither of us said anything that mattered in words. When her breathing steadied, I asked about Evelyn, about Julian. She told me about the restaurant someplace downtown. She didn't know the name. They had taken his card and left after lunch and had not been back. I asked when they had left. She said around noon. She had been alone in the house for 13 hours. I helped her up. I walked her to the stairs. And that was when the light in the hallway caught her left arm at the angle that showed me what had been done to it. And something happened inside my chest that I do not have a word for, not anger, not grief, something older and colder than either of those things. Something that had been installed in me the first time I held her in a hospital room 16 years ago, and had been running quietly ever since, waiting to be needed. I kept my face still. I kept my voice level. I tucked her into her bed and sat on the edge of it until her breathing slowed into sleep. Then I went back downstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I made, because my hands needed something to do, and I looked at the bowl still on the floor and where Lily had been kneeling, and I thought about 30 years of electrical work, and I thought about what Diane had told me once early in our marriage, when I had come home frustrated from a job where I couldn't locate a fault that was causing intermittent outages in a building's secondary circuit. Stop looking at where the problem is showing up, she had said. Start at the source and work forward. The fault is always upstream. I was going to start upstream. Lily left for school at 7:15. I walked her to the door myself. I handed her the lunch I had made while she was getting dressed. A turkey sandwich, an apple, a bag of pretzels. The kind of lunch that takes 5 minutes to put together, and that I realized standing at the kitchen counter at 6:50 in the morning I had not made for her in months. She looked at the paper bag like she was not sure she was allowed to take it. Eat at a real table today, I said. She looked up at me. Something moved in her face, not quite a smile, but the motion a smile makes before it decides whether to finish. She took the bag. Okay, Dad. I watched her go down the front steps and along the sidewalk until she turned the corner at the end of Crestwood Avenue. Then I went back inside, locked the front door, and stood in the hallway for a moment. Evelyn and Julian had not come home. I did not know where they were, and I did not call to ask. I needed the house empty, and it was empty, and I was not going to waste the time I had been given. I am an electrician. Before I touch anything in an unfamiliar panel, I document it. I photograph the existing wiring. I note the positions of every breaker. I record what I see before I change any of it. Evidence of the original condition. A record of what was there before I arrived. 30 years of working in other people's buildings had made this instinct so deep it operated without conscious thought. I got my phone out and opened the camera before I touched the first drawer. Kitchen first. The junk drawer beside the refrigerator. Every house has one, the universal repository for things that don't belong anywhere else and that nobody wants to make a decision about. 3 takeout menus from restaurants I had never ordered from. A flashlight with dead batteries. A folded receipt from a jewelry consignment store on Central Avenue in White Plains dated 6 weeks ago. I did not own jewelry. I photographed the receipt and noted the address. 2 keys on a plain ring that did not match any lock in the house that I could identify. I photographed those too. I moved to the bedroom. Evelyn's side of the dresser, first the top drawer, which I had never opened because it was not mine to open a boundary I had maintained out of the basic respect that I believed a marriage required. I opened it now without hesitation. Folded scarves on the left side. A small leather pouch that held 2 debit cards, neither in Evelyn's name, neither in mine, both issued by a bank in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that I had never had an account with. A 3rd card tucked beneath the pouch, this one a prepaid Visa with no name on the front. I photographed all of it. The closet was next. Evelyn's clothes on the left side, Julian's things on a shelf above the rod on the right. And behind the hanging clothes, pushed back against the wall in the corner, a suitcase. Dark gray, hard-sided, the kind designed for extended travel. I had not put it there. I had not seen it before. I pulled it out. It was heavier than a packed suitcase had any business being for people who had just returned from an overnight trip. I set it on the bed and stood there for a moment, the way I stand at a panel before I open it, when I can hear that something inside is wrong, but I do not yet know what. Then I unzipped it. Not clothes, not toiletries, not the ordinary contents of a bag belonging to people who live in a house and occasionally travel from it. On the left side, a winter coat, heavy boots, stacks of folded thermal underwear and sweaters enough for 4 to 6 weeks. On the right side, tucked into the mesh pocket along the interior wall, a fat envelope rubber-banded tight that felt like cash when I pressed it between my fingers. And beneath the envelope, flat against the bottom of the suitcase, 2 things that I photographed separately before I touched either of them. The first was a black notebook, small enough to fit in a jacket pocket, its spine cracked and soft from being opened and closed many hundreds of times. The second was a document several pages folded in thirds, the kind of fold that fits a standard business envelope. I picked up the notebook first. The cover was plain. No label, no marking. I opened it to the first page. A list. 7 entries arranged in neat columns across the page in the small, precise, entirely confident handwriting of someone who had been keeping records for a long time. Each entry had a name, an age, an occupation, a location, a brief description of assets, and a status notation in the right-hand margin. I read down the list. Entry 1, a woman in her late 60s, retired schoolteacher, homeowner, Tennessee. Status complete. Entry 2, a man in his early 70s, retired contractor, Florida. Status complete. Entry 3, a woman 64, small business owner, Georgia. Status withdrawn, relocated. Entry 4, my name. Raymond Holt, 58. Electrician, Yonkers, NY. House paid. Truck paid. Life insurance verify. Widowed May 2021. 1 daughter minor. No immediate family within 50 miles. In the right margin, in the same neat hand, a small check mark. And 1 word. Active. Below my name, 3 more entries. No check marks. Just names and question marks, and the careful notations of someone who had not yet gotten to them. I was not the destination. I was the 4th stop on a route that had started before I ever met Evelyn Marsh, and that was intended to continue after me. I set the notebook down and picked up the folded document. It was a will. 3 pages formatted correctly with the proper headings and witnessing lines, and the language that wills use. I, Raymond James Holt, being of sound mind, and my name typed at the top of the first page as the testator, the person whose wishes the document was meant to record. The document directed that in the event of my death, all assets, the house on Crestwood Avenue, the truck, the contents of all financial accounts, the life insurance policy were to pass to Evelyn Marsh Holt. Lily's name did not appear anywhere in the document. The signature line at the bottom of the third page was blank. The document had been prepared, but not yet signed. Under New York Penal Law Section 170, the preparation of a forged legal instrument, a document falsely made or completed with intent to defraud, constitutes second-degree forgery, a Class D felony. The fact that my signature was not yet on it did not make the document less dangerous. It made it a statement of intent sitting in a suitcase that was packed for a departure waiting for the right moment. I folded it along its original creases and put it in my shirt pocket with the notebook. Then I went to find my phone's settings. I went to the app management screen, scrolled through the list of installed applications, and found it 4 screens down Family Track installed 6 months ago, running continuously in the background, transmitting my location data to an account I had never created. I took a screenshot of the app information screen. Then I went to the privacy settings and revoked every permission it had. I did not uninstall it yet. Frank would want to see it in place. I stood in the bedroom with my shirt pocket full of evidence and looked at the open suitcase on the bed. The winter coat, the boots, the envelope that felt like cash. They were not planning to stay. I drove to the bank at 9:20. Not because I had finished everything at the house I had not finished, not by a long way, but because the bank opened at 9, and I had learned in 30 years of running a small electrical business that financial records are the clearest language a situation can speak. Wiring diagrams tell you where the electricity is supposed to go. Bank statements tell you where the money actually went. The two are rarely the same in a compromised system, and the gap between them is always where the problem lives. First National Bank of Yonkers had a branch on South Broadway, 4 minutes from Crestwood Avenue by truck. I had been banking there since 1999, the same branch, the same building, the same teller windows, with the same dark wood paneling that had been there since the branch opened in 1987. And that the bank had never seen fit to modernize because their customers were the kind of people who found consistency reassuring. Linda Marsh, no relation to anyone named Marsh that I was aware of, though the coincidence of the name would occur to me later, and sit unpleasantly for a moment before I set it aside, had been processing my deposits and answering my questions at that branch for 11 years. She was in her mid-50s, careful and unhurried, the kind of bank employee who had seen enough of people's financial lives to be unsurprisable and kind about it simultaneously. She looked up when I came through the door at 9:23. Something in my face must have communicated that this was not a routine visit, because she said without preamble, "Mr. Holt, what do you need?" 2 years of statements, I said. Every account connected to my Social Security number. Joint accounts, individual accounts, savings, everything. She did not ask why. 11 years of doing business earns certain courtesies, and one of them is that a man who has never bounced a check and has always been polite does not get asked to explain himself when he requests his own financial records. She sat down at her terminal and began pulling the accounts. I sat in the chair beside her desk and waited. She printed 6 pages. She paper-clipped them and handed them across without comment. "Anything else?" "That's everything," I said. "Thank you, Linda." I took the pages out to the truck and spread them across the passenger seat, the same seat where I kept my work binder, where I laid out GOP specs and material lists, and the accumulated paperwork of 30 years of running a business by myself. I got out the red pen I used for marking up job sheets, and I started at the top of page 1. The first 14 months were clean. ordinary household expenses, groceries, utilities, the property tax payment. In January, the truck insurance. In March, the twice-yearly deposits into Lily's college savings account that I had been maintaining since Diane set it up, smaller amounts than Diane had contributed, but steady. Everything where it should be in the amounts it should be at the intervals it should be. Then 9 months after the wedding, a transfer appeared, $1,140, sent to an account number I did not recognize at a bank I did not have a relationship with. I circled it in red. I kept reading. 980. Circle. 1,190. Circle. 860. Circle. The amounts varied, never the same number twice in a row, never with an obvious pattern to the specific figures, but the frequency was consistent. Every 3 to 4 weeks, without exception, a transfer went out. And every transfer landed below $1,200. I knew enough about American banking regulations to understand why that number mattered. The Bank Secrecy Act requires financial institutions to file a currency transaction report for cash movements over $10,000, and banks are also required to flag unusual patterns that might indicate structured transactions, a practice called smurfing, in which larger amounts are broken into smaller transfers specifically to avoid automatic reporting triggers. The threshold that most compliance systems use for pattern flagging is $1,200 per transaction. Stay below it consistently, and you move money in amounts that look to an automated system like ordinary household expenses. Whoever had set the transfer limit had known exactly where the line was. The amounts varied, but the pattern was consistent, regular, unhurried, and never once over $1,200. Whoever had set the transfer limit had known exactly where the line was. The handwriting in the notebook was Evelyn's. The design of the transfer schedule had her fingerprints on it, patient, precise, calibrated to stay invisible. Beatrice had helped execute the transfers on the days Evelyn set, but the architecture was Evelyn's. I added the column twice to be certain. $47,200, 26 months. Transferred out of my accounts in increments small enough that no single one had triggered a review, regular enough that the total had accumulated without my noticing, because I had been trusting the people in my house the way you trust a circuit you have already tested without checking it again. I put the pen down. I looked at the number for a moment. Then I did the calculation that I had been putting off, doing the one I had known was coming since I first started circling transfers and had not been ready to face until I had the final total in front of me. $47,000 was approximately 2,000 hours of electrical work at my standard rate. 2,000 hours was 50 weeks of full-time work. 50 weeks was roughly 1 year of my life. 1 year of early mornings and job sites, and driving home tired and calling Lily from rest stops on the thruway, and missing things I had not known I was missing. They had taken a year of my life and distributed it across 26 months in increments of under $1,200. I sat with that for a moment. Then I turned to the page that covered Lily's college account and felt the breath go out of me in a way that had nothing to do with the $47,000. The account that Diane had opened in 2009. The account she had contributed to for 12 years, sometimes $50 at a time, sometimes more, always with the specific focused intention of a woman who had grown up without options and was determined that her daughter would have them. The account I had continued funding after Diane died in smaller amounts, but without interruption, because it was the thing Diane had asked me to keep going, and I had kept it going. 0. The balance was 0. The withdrawals had happened over 14 months in the same sub-threshold pattern as the joint account transfers, beginning 4 months after Evelyn's name was added to the account management authorization, a document I had signed at Beatrice's suggestion in this same bank on a Tuesday afternoon in November of 2023, believing I was making it easier for Evelyn to handle administrative tasks while I was on the road. $22,000. Gone. The money Diane had saved for Lily's education. The money I had continued saving because Diane had asked me to, taken in amounts of under $1,200 over 14 months. My hands were not steady when I folded the statements. They had been steady through everything else this morning, through the notebook and the will and the debit cards with the wrong names on them. My hands had been steady because I had been operating on the discipline of a man who knows that the worst thing you can do in a dangerous electrical situation is let your hands shake before you finish the work. They shook now. I pressed them flat on the passenger seat and breathed and looked out the windshield at the parking lot of a bank branch on South Broadway in Yonkers on a Tuesday morning in October. And I thought about Diane at her laptop on a Tuesday night in 2017 turning the screen to show me the account balance with that particular brightness in her face. $22,000. I want to get it to 60 before she graduates. I folded the statements and put them in my shirt pocket with the notebook and the will and everything else I had been accumulating since 6 in the morning. Then I drove to number 14 Crestwood Avenue and knocked on Bob Garrett's door. Bob Garrett opened the door before I finished knocking. Not after the second knock, not after a pause during which I could hear footsteps approaching from inside. He opened the door mid-knock, which meant he had been standing on the other side of it close enough to hear me coming up the front path waiting. He was dressed in a flannel shirt and work pants, the clothes of a man who had been up for hours and had not been idle. His face had the specific expression of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just been given permission to set it down. "Raymond," he said. "Bob," I said. "You got a few minutes." He pulled the door fully open and stepped back without another word. The inside of Bob's house was the inside of a man who lived alone and had made his peace with it clean, in the way that comes from habit rather than expectation. A single coffee mug on the kitchen counter, a newspaper folded to the crossword on the table, a jacket hung over the back of a chair, in the way a jacket gets hung when there is no one else to notice where you put things. On the wall above the television, a photograph of a woman in her 40s laughing at something outside the frame. His wife, I knew. She had died 4 years ago. He had moved to Yonkers to be near his daughter, who had moved to Connecticut, leaving him alone in a house on Crestwood Avenue with too many windows and too much time to look out of them. He poured me a coffee without asking. He set it on the table in front of me and then reached into the kitchen drawer beside the refrigerator and produced a manila envelope, the large, heavy-duty kind, the kind you buy at an office supply store when you need to protect something, and set it on the table next to the coffee. He sat down across from me and put both hands flat on the table. "I want to say something before I say anything else," he said. His voice was the voice of a man who had rehearsed this, who had been rehearsing it for a while. "I almost came to your door a dozen times. I saw things I should not have ignored. I told myself it wasn't my place to get between a man and his family." He shook his head once slowly. "I was wrong about that. I am sorry, Raymond. I mean that." "You're here now," I said. "That's what I need. What's in the envelope?" He nodded at it. "Open it." I undid the clasp and lifted the flap. Inside a stack of photographs, each one placed face down, each one with a date written on the back, in careful blue ballpoint. Bob's handwriting, the neat block letter printing of a man who had spent 22 years writing incident reports for the New York City Police Department and had never lost the habit of documentation. I turned the first one over. Lily in the dark of early morning, carrying 2 garbage bags to the curb. The timestamp in the corner of the image read 4:22 a.m. The date on the back, a Thursday in January. I turned the next one. Lily sitting on the back porch steps with a bowl in her hands, eating alone. Through the kitchen window behind her, the warm light of the kitchen interior was visible, and in that light, the shapes of Evelyn and Julian at the table plates in front of them. I kept going. Lily, in a short-sleeved shirt, on a morning in late October when Bob's own breath had fogged in the cold when he took the shot. Lily waiting at the end of the driveway for the school bus, with the particular stillness of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Lily carrying a laundry basket up the back steps at 11:45 at night. The timestamps did not lie. The dates on the backs did not lie. 46 photographs. Each one a Tuesday or a Thursday or a random Wednesday. Each one taken with the patience of a man who understood that evidence was only useful when it was complete. And then the 47th. I knew what it was before I turned it over because Bob's hand came across the table and rested on top of mine for just a moment, not stopping me, just acknowledging what was coming. I turned it over. Lily, standing on the front path of my house, arms crossed over her chest, facing the kitchen window. Inside the window, the warm yellow light. The shapes of Evelyn and Julian. A cake on the counter, candles lit. And my daughter outside in the October cold looking in. Bob had written on the back October 14th. Lily's birthday. She stood there 9 minutes. I set the photograph down on the table face up and looked at it and did not say anything for a moment, because there was nothing to say that the photograph had not already said more completely than I could have managed. She knocked on the front door at one point, Bob said. His voice had gone rough at the edges. About 4 minutes in. Nobody answered. He cleared his throat. I went out to my car and got the zucchini bread my daughter had sent down last weekend, and I took it across. It was all I had ready. He pressed his lips together hard. She said thank you the way a child says thank you when they haven't been given something in a long time. Like it was more than zucchini bread. My jaw was locked so tight, I could feel it in my back teeth. I kept my hands flat on the table. I tried to do something about it, Bob said. I want you to know that. Last spring, I called the New York State Child Protective Services hotline. They sent a caseworker out within the week. He shook his head. She knew they were coming. I don't know how I found out later about the tracking application on your phone, but she knew. Everything was arranged. Lily was at the table. The kitchen was spotless. Evelyn made tea for the caseworker and sat across from her and talked about how concerned the family was about Lily's adjustment to the blended household. He paused. The caseworker filed a report of no findings. Insufficient evidence of a pattern. He looked at me steadily. Until now. I called Frank Delaney from Bob's kitchen table at 11:45 that morning. Frank was a family law and asset protection attorney out of White Plains, a compact, precise man in his early 60s who had been recommended to me by my accountant 3 years ago for help with my business succession planning and whom I had not called since. He picked up on the second ring. I gave him the short version. 7 minutes. The notebook. The will. The bank statements $47,200 across 26 months below the Bank Secrecy Act reporting threshold. The suitcase packed for a departure. The 47 photographs. The app installed without consent. Frank listened without interrupting. When I finished, there were 4 seconds of silence before he spoke. "Where are you right now?" he said. "My neighbor's kitchen. Go home. Don't confront anyone. Don't move anything you've already moved, and don't touch anything you haven't touched yet." His voice had the focused, unhurried quality of a man shifting into a register he was very practiced in. "I'm going to make 2 calls. I'll be at your house tomorrow morning at 7. Can you get me the originals of everything?" "Yes," I said. "Raymond." A brief pause. "You did the right thing documenting before you touched." That matters more than you know. I hung up and sat for a moment with Bob's coffee cooling in front of me, and the 47th photograph still face up on the table between us. Bob was looking at it too. Neither of us needed to explain to the other what we were looking at or what it meant. "She's a good kid," Bob said finally. His voice had gone very quiet. "Whatever they told you about her, whatever came out of that house while you were gone. She is a genuinely good kid, Raymond." I picked up the photograph and put it back in the envelope with the others. I stood up and held out my hand, and Bob shook it with both of his and held on for a moment, the way a man holds on when a handshake is carrying more than a handshake usually has to carry. "You found the right thing to do," I said, "even if it took a while." I took the envelope and walked back across Crestwood Avenue to my house. The afternoon light was coming in at a low angle through the oak tree in the front yard, the way October light does in New York, thin and gold and honest, the kind that doesn't pretend to be warmer than it is. I had the notebook. I had the statements. I had 47 photographs. I had a will that had not yet been signed, and an app that had been running for 6 months without my knowledge. That evening, I was going to need Marcus, and Marcus was going to need Frank. The afternoon passed. The way afternoons pass when you are waiting for something you cannot rush. I went back to the house at noon. Evelyn and Julian still had not returned. I did not know where they were, and I had made a decision somewhere between Bob's kitchen table and my own front door that I was not going to call and ask. Calling would tell them I was home. Telling them I was home would start a clock I was not ready to start yet. Frank had said 7 in the morning. I had 19 hours. I used them carefully. I photographed every room in the house the way I photograph a job site before I start work. Systematically, corner to corner, nothing skipped. The kitchen with the cracked dog bowl still on the floor where Lily had been kneeling. I had not moved it. I was not going to move it until Frank told me to. The bedroom with the open suitcase still on the bed, the winter coats and the rubber-banded envelope visible inside. Evelyn's dresser open drawers, debit cards still in place. I photographed the Family Track app screen on my phone with the installation date and the account it was transmitting to. I photographed the junk drawer, the receipt from the jewelry consignment store, the 2 unidentified keys. Then I went to Julian's room. I want to be precise about why I went there and what I was looking for. Lily had told me in the kitchen at 5 in the morning, when she was still half asleep and saying things she might not have said if she had been fully awake, that Julian had taken something from the main bedroom. She had not said what. She had started to say it, and then stopped the way she stopped things when she had learned that saying them did not reliably produce results. I had not pushed her at 5 in the morning because she was exhausted, and because I needed her to sleep more than I needed that particular piece of information right then. Standing outside Julian's door at 12:30 in the afternoon, I thought about what was missing from my bedroom that I had noticed without consciously registering. I turned the handle and went in. The room was 14-year-old boy messy in the specific way that has its own internal logic, clothes in a pile near the closet rather than inside it, a gaming headset on the desk, sneakers kicked off near the door. On the dresser, a half-empty bottle of cologne, a charging cable, $3 in quarters, and a watch. Small, silver. A woman's watch, the kind that pins to a lapel or loops on a delicate chain. I crossed the room in 4 steps and picked it up with hands that had been steady all morning and were not steady now. Diane's watch. The watch her grandmother had worn, and her grandmother's mother before that. The watch Diane had pressed into my palm from a hospital bed in March of 2021 and asked me to give to Lily when she was ready. The watch I had put in Diane's jewelry box that same afternoon and checked on every few months for 2 years, until I stopped checking because finding it there hurt too much. It had not been lost. It had been sitting on a 14-year-old boy's dresser next to $3 in quarters and a bottle of drugstore cologne. I held it in my closed fist for a moment. Then I put it in my shirt pocket next to the notebook and the will and the bank statements and everything else I had collected since 6 that morning. My shirt pocket had become an evidence file, a record of everything that had been taken from this house by people I had let in. Lily came home from school at 3:15. She came through the front door and stopped when she saw me in the kitchen, the way she had been stopping and assessing doorways for months now, reading the room before she committed to entering it. I had set out a plate of crackers and peanut butter and a glass of milk on the table, the after-school snack she had liked since she was 7, the one Diane used to have ready when Lily came through the door. She looked at the plate. She looked at me. She sat down. "I found something in Julian's room," I said. "I want you to look at it." I set the watch on the table in front of her. She went very still. Her hand came out and touched the edge of the case, one fingertip, the careful touch of someone handling something they were not certain they were allowed to touch. "That's Mom's," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said. "He took it about 6 months ago." She kept her eyes on the watch. "I saw it on his dresser, and I knew what it was because of the photo you keep on your nightstand, the one from their anniversary." She looked up at me then, and her eyes were bright and wet, but her voice stayed level with the specific effort of someone who has had a great deal of practice keeping their voice level. "I tried to take it back once. He caught me and told Evelyn I was stealing from his room. That was the week she showed me the paper from the doctor." A pause. I didn't try again after that. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held on. We stayed like that for a while. Then she ate the crackers and peanut butter and drank the milk. And I sat across from her and watched my daughter eat an after-school snack at her own kitchen table like a person who belonged there. And I did not tell her yet what I had found or what was going to happen, because she had carried enough for long enough, and she could carry this particular weight for one more evening. Evelyn and Julian came home at 6:47. I heard the car in the driveway, heard the front door, heard Evelyn's voice calling my name with the particular brightness of someone returning from a pleasant day out. I was in the living room. I said hello. I said I was tired from the drive back. I said I was going to turn in early. Evelyn put her hand on my arm and said she was glad I was home. I nodded and went upstairs. I lay on the bed with my eyes open and listened to the sounds of the house until 9:15. Julian's television. Evelyn on the phone, her voice too low to make out words. Water running in the kitchen. The specific domestic soundtrack of a household that believed it was still operating successfully. At 9:40, I got up and went out to the truck. The cab was the one place in this house on this street in my life that had been entirely mine for 30 years. No one else's hands on the wheel. No one else's coffee cup in the holder. Just the dark and the quiet, and the particular stillness of a space that belonged to me without condition. I called Marcus Webb. He picked up on the second ring. No greeting. Just, "You home?" "Yeah," I said. "You sound like a man who found something he wasn't ready to find." 20 years of working alongside someone teaches them your voice the way a long marriage teaches a person your footstep on the stairs. "How bad?" I gave him the short version. Not the whole story, there wasn't time for the whole story, and Marcus was not a man who needed the whole story to understand what he was being told. The notebook. 7 names. Mine, fourth, 2 words, active. The bank statements, $47,200. The will with the blank signature line. The 47 photographs. The watch on Julian's dresser. Marcus was quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. "The watch," he said. "Diane's watch." "Yes." Another pause shorter. "I'll be there at 6:30. I'll call Frank on the way." His voice shifted into something quieter. "Raymond, last Christmas." Lily sat at the end of the table and barely said 10 words the whole meal. I had a feeling something was wrong, and I didn't say anything. He cleared his throat hard. "That was wrong. I'm sorry for it." "You're on the phone at 9:40 on a Tuesday," I said. "That's enough." "6:30, he said, and hung up. I called Melissa at 9:52. She answered on the first ring, which meant she had been awake, which meant some part of her had been waiting for this call longer than tonight. "Ray?" Her voice was careful and very still. "I need you to come down," I said, "tomorrow morning. And I need you to bring whatever you'd bring if you were planning to stay a few days." A pause of 3 seconds. "Then I'll leave at 5. No questions." No, I told you so, though she had earned it more than anyone. Just the immediate, unconditional mobilization of a woman who had been ready for this phone call for 2 years. "Mel," I said. "I know," she said quietly. "I know, Ray. I'll be there." I sat in the truck for 20 minutes after I hung up. Then I went back inside, walked past the living room where Evelyn was watching television, and went upstairs. I did not look in as I passed the doorway. I went to bed, and La Frank Delaney arrived at 6:28. Not 6:30, 6:28, which told me something about the kind of man Frank was. The kind who builds 2 minutes of margin into everything he does, not because he is anxious, but because he understands that the difference between prepared and unprepared is usually measured in the time you did not think you would need. He came through the front door with a leather document bag over one shoulder and a legal pad under his arm. And he did not ask for coffee, and he did not make small talk. He sat down at the kitchen table, set the legal pad in front of him, uncapped a pen, and looked at me. "Show me everything," he said, "in the order you found it." I put the notebook on the table first. He opened it and read every page without changing his expression, turning the pages with the deliberate pace of someone who is processing, rather than simply reading, cataloging, organizing, building the structure of what he was looking at in real time. He made 3 notes on his legal pad. He closed the notebook and set it on his left. The will next. He unfolded it, read all 3 pages, read the signature line, refolded it along its original creases, and set it on top of the notebook. The bank statements. He went through them with a red pen of his own, circling the same transfers I had circled, and then he did something I had not done. He charted the intervals between transfers on a separate page of his legal pad, mapping the pattern the way an engineer maps a circuit. 32 days, 28 days, 31 days. Never the same interval twice, but always within a 4-day window of a month. Regular without being mechanical. Designed to look organic. "She's done this before," he said. Not a question. "Entry 1 in the notebook," I said. "Tennessee, marked complete." He wrote something on the legal pad. "I'll make a call to a colleague in Nashville this morning." The debit cards. The unidentified keys. The receipt from the jewelry consignment store. The screenshot of the Family Track app still installed on my phone. He examined each item in turn, made notes, arranged them in a row on the table with the precision of a man laying out surgical instruments. Last, the envelope from Bob. He went through the 47 photographs, the same way I had slowly face by face, date by date. When he reached the 47th, he held it for a moment longer than the others. He set it down in the center of the table, face up. He looked at it for 4 seconds. Then he picked up his pen. "I'm going to file 2 motions this morning," he said. His voice had the focused, almost impersonal quality of someone who has moved past the emotional content of a situation and into its solutions. The first is an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts and any secondary accounts receiving transfers from those accounts. Under New York law, documented evidence of systematic financial fraud qualifies for a temporary restraining order, a court order that can be issued the same day without prior notice to the other party. The funds cannot be moved until a judge lifts the order. He made a note. The second motion is an emergency order of protection for Lily filed simultaneously through Yonkers Family Court. Under the New York Family Court Act, an emergency order of protection can be granted within hours when there is documented evidence of ongoing harm to a minor. The photographs, the medical documentation Melissa is going to provide this morning, and Lily's own written account will support the motion. He paused. Can Lily write 4 pages about what happened over the past year? Specific, factual, chronological. She can write more than that, I said. He nodded. 4 is enough. I need it before noon. Marcus came through the front door at 6:34, 4 minutes after Frank, moving with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had decided the night before exactly what this morning was going to require of him. He shook Frank's hand, looked at the table full of evidence, looked at me and said, "What do you need me to do?" "Stay in the house," I said. "When they come downstairs, I need someone between them and that table." He pulled out a chair and sat down. He did not say anything else. That was Marcus. He understood that some situations called for presence rather than commentary, and he was very good at being present. Lily came downstairs at 7:15 in the same cautious way she came downstairs, now stopping at the bottom step to read the room before she committed to entering it. She looked at Frank, at Marcus, at the table covered in documents, at me. "Sit down, sweetheart," I said. "These are people who are helping us." She sat in her chair the one that had been hers since she was small, and Frank introduced himself in a voice that was warm in a way I had not heard from him yet, the voice of a man who knew how to modulate himself for different rooms. He explained what he needed from her quietly and without pressure, and she listened with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting a long time to be asked to do something useful. She wrote for 40 minutes at the kitchen table, while Frank made calls from the living room and Marcus made eggs. 4 pages front and back in her careful, even handwriting, specific, chronological, factual, entirely without self-pity. When she finished, she slid the pages across the table to me. I read them standing at the counter. My chest did the thing it had been doing all morning, the thing I did not have a clean word for, the particular pain of a parent reading a document that should never have needed to exist. Melissa arrived at 10:07, exactly when I had calculated she would, based on a 5 a.m. departure from Albany. She came through the door, looked at Lily sitting at the table, crossed the kitchen in 6 steps, and put both arms around her niece without saying a word. Lily pressed her face into Melissa's shoulder and held on. "Okay," Melissa said into Lily's hair. "Okay, baby, I've got you." She took Lily to the urgent care clinic on McLean Avenue at 10:30. A licensed physician documented every bruise, every mark, every indication of what a year of physical mistreatment looked like on a 16-year-old girl's body. The report took 40 minutes to produce. It was 8 pages long. Melissa brought back 2 certified copies, one for Frank, one for the family court filing. At 11:17, Frank filed both motions from the living room, his laptop balanced on his knees, his phone wedged between his ear and shoulder as he confirmed the filing number with the clerk's office in a voice that did not waver. Carol Simmons, Lily's homeroom teacher at Roosevelt High, the woman who had called the house 3 times and been intercepted by Evelyn 3 times, sent an email at 1:43 in the afternoon before Frank had even reached out to her because she had seen the urgent care clinic visit on Lily's school absence record and had connected it to the file she had been keeping since October of the previous year. 3 call logs, each one time-stamped, each one noting that she had spoken with a woman who identified herself as Lily's stepmother. 3 pages of observations about Lily's attendance, her grades, her appearance, her affect. 12 months of a teacher paying attention to a student and writing down what she saw. Frank read Carol's email and made a sound that was not quite a word. "What?" I said. "This teacher," he said, "may have just made our protective order motion airtight." He forwarded the email to the family court filing address without looking up from the screen. Frank's phone rang at 3:47 in the afternoon. He looked at the screen, stood up from the table, and walked to the far end of the living room. I watched his back. He was on the call for 90 seconds. When he turned around, his face had the expression of a man who has just received confirmation of something he had already believed to be true but had not yet been able to prove. "Judge Patricia Owens signed the order at 3:44, he said. "Both motions. Accounts frozen effective immediately. Emergency order of protection for Lily, effective immediately." He paused. "She noted in the margin of the order that the photographic documentation was, and I am quoting directly, among the most comprehensive evidence of sustained harm to a minor that this court has received in a single filing." I sat down in the nearest chair. The accounts were frozen. Wherever Evelyn tried to use her card, a restaurant, a gas station, an ATM, it would decline. She would not know why until she called the bank, and when she called the bank, she would be told that the accounts were subject to a court order and that she needed to speak to her attorney. She was coming home on Sunday. Today was Wednesday. 36 hours, Frank said, looking at his legal pad. "We have 36 hours before they're back. Let's talk about how we use them." I looked at the kitchen table, Frank's documents, Bob's photographs, Lily's 4 pages, Carol's email, print out the notebook with its 7 names and its careful columns. I thought about 30 years of electrical work, about the difference between a job that was done and a job that was done right. "Tell me what needs to happen," I said, "and we'll make it happen." Why in the dark with my shirt pocket on the nightstand and Diane's watch inside it, and I thought about the morning and what Frank was going to say when he saw everything I had assembled. 30 years of electrical work. You plan the job before you start it. You know where every wire is going before you touch the first one. Tomorrow morning we were going to start the job. Frank Delaney arrived at 6:28, not 6:30. 6:28, which told me something about the kind of man Frank was, the kind who builds 2 minutes of margin into everything he does, not because he is anxious, but because he understands that the difference between prepared and unprepared is usually measured in the time you did not think you would need. He came through the front door with a leather document bag over one shoulder and a legal pad under his arm. And he did not ask for coffee, and he did not make small talk. He sat down at the kitchen table, set the legal pad in front of him, uncapped a pen, and looked at me. "Show me everything," he said, "in the order you found it." I put the notebook on the table first. He opened it and read every page without changing his expression, turning the pages with the deliberate pace of someone who is processing rather than simply reading, cataloging, organizing, building the structure of what he was looking at in real time. He made 3 notes on his legal pad. He closed the notebook and set it on his left. The will next. He unfolded it, read all 3 pages, read the signature line, refolded it along its original creases, and set it on top of the notebook. The bank statements. He went through them with a red pen of his own, circling the same transfers I had circled. And then he did something I had not done. He charted the intervals between transfers on a separate page of his legal pad, mapping the pattern the way an engineer maps a circuit. 32 days, 28 days, 31 days. Never the same interval twice, but always within a 4-day window of a month. Regular without being mechanical. Designed to look organic. "She's done this before," he said. Not a question. "Entry 1 in the notebook," I said. "Tennessee, marked complete." He wrote something on the legal pad. "I'll make a call to a colleague in Nashville this morning. The debit cards." the unidentified keys, the receipt from the jewelry consignment store, the screenshot of the Family Track app still installed on my phone. He examined each item in turn, made notes, arranged them in a row on the table, with the precision of a man laying out surgical instruments. Last, the envelope from Bob. He went through the 47 photographs the same way I had, slowly, face by face, date by date. When he reached the 47th, he held it for a moment longer than the others. He set it down in the center of the table, face up. He looked at it for 4 seconds. Then he picked up his pen. "I'm going to file 2 motions this morning," he said. His voice had the focused, almost impersonal quality of someone who has moved past the emotional content of a situation and into its solutions. The first is an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts and any secondary accounts receiving transfers from those accounts. Under New York law, documented evidence of systematic financial fraud qualifies for a temporary restraining order, a court order that can be issued the same day without prior notice to the other party. The funds cannot be moved until a judge lifts the order. He made a note. The second motion is an emergency order of protection for Lily, filed simultaneously through Yonkers Family Court. Under the New York Family Court Act, an emergency order of protection can be granted within hours when there is documented evidence of ongoing harm to a minor. The photographs, the medical documentation Melissa is going to provide this morning, and Lily's own written account will support the motion. He paused. Can Lily write 4 pages about what happened over the past year? Specific, factual, chronological. She can write more than that, I said. He nodded. 4 is enough. I need it before noon. Marcus came through the front door at 6:34, 4 minutes after Frank, moving with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had decided the night before exactly what this morning was going to require of him. He shook Frank's hand, looked at the table full of evidence, looked at me and said, "What do you need me to do?" "Stay in the house," I said. "When they come downstairs, I need someone between them and that table." He pulled out a chair and sat down. He did not say anything else. That was Marcus. He understood that some situations called for presence rather than commentary, and he was very good at being present. Lily came downstairs at 7:15 in the same cautious way she came downstairs, now stopping at the bottom step to read the room before she committed to entering it. She looked at Frank, at Marcus, at the table covered in documents, at me. "Sit down, sweetheart," I said. "These are people who are helping us." She sat in her chair, the one that had been hers since she was small, and Frank introduced himself in a voice that was warm, in a way I had not heard from him yet. The voice of a man who knew how to modulate himself for different rooms. He explained what he needed from her quietly and without pressure, and she listened with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting a long time to be asked to do something useful. She wrote for 40 minutes at the kitchen table while Frank made calls from the living room and Marcus made eggs. 4 pages front and back in her careful, even handwriting, specific, chronological, factual, entirely without self-pity. When she finished, she slid the pages across the table to me. I read them standing at the counter. My chest did the thing it had been doing all morning, the thing I did not have a clean word for, the particular pain of a parent reading a document that should never have needed to exist. Melissa arrived at 10:07, exactly when I had calculated she would, based on a 5 a.m. departure from Albany. She came through the door, looked at Lily sitting at the table, crossed the kitchen in 6 steps, and put both arms around her niece without saying a word. Lily pressed her face into Melissa's shoulder and held on. "Okay," Melissa said into Lily's hair. "Okay, baby. I've got you." She took Lily to the urgent care clinic on McLean Avenue at 10:30. A licensed physician documented every bruise, every mark, every indication of what a year of physical mistreatment looked like on a 16-year-old girl's body. The report took 40 minutes to produce. It was 8 pages long. Melissa brought back 2 certified copies, one for Frank, one for the family court filing. At 11:17, Frank filed both motions from the living room, his laptop balanced on his knees, his phone wedged between his ear and shoulder, as he confirmed the filing number with the clerk's office, in a voice that did not waver. Carol Simmons, Lily's homeroom teacher at Roosevelt High, the woman who had called the house 3 times and been intercepted by Evelyn 3 times, sent an email at 1:43 in the afternoon, before Frank had even reached out to her because she had seen the urgent care clinic visit on Lily's school absence record and had connected it to the file she had been keeping since October of the previous year. 3 call logs, each one time-stamped, each one noting that she had spoken with a woman who identified herself as Lily's stepmother. 3 pages of observations about Lily's attendance, her grades, her appearance, her affect. 12 months of a teacher paying attention to a student and writing down what she saw. Frank read Carol's email and made a sound that was not quite a word. "What?" I said. "This teacher," he said, "may have just made our protective order motion airtight." He forwarded the email to the family court filing address without looking up from the screen. Frank's phone rang at 3:47 in the afternoon. He looked at the screen, stood up from the table, and walked to the far end of the living room. I watched his back. He was on the call for 90 seconds. When he turned around, his face had the expression of a man who has just received confirmation of something he had already believed to be true but had not yet been able to prove. "Judge Patricia Owens signed the order at 3:44, he said. "Both motions. Accounts frozen effective immediately. Emergency order of protection for Lily, effective immediately." He paused. She noted in the margin of the order that the photographic documentation was, and I am quoting directly, among the most comprehensive evidence of sustained harm to a minor that this court has received in a single filing. I sat down in the nearest chair. The accounts were frozen. Wherever Evelyn tried to use her card, a restaurant, a gas station, an ATM, it would decline. She would not know why until she called the bank, and when she called the bank, she would be told that the accounts were subject to a court order and that she needed to speak to her attorney. She was coming home on Sunday. Today was Wednesday. 36 hours, Frank said, looking at his legal pad. "We have 36 hours before they're back. Let's talk about how we use them." I looked at the kitchen table, Frank's documents, Bob's photographs, Lily's 4 pages, Carol's email printout, the notebook with its 7 names and its careful columns. I thought about 30 years of electrical work, about the difference between a job that was done and a job that was done right. "Tell me what needs to happen," I said, "and we'll make it happen." Saturday arrived with an ordinary face that did not match what was happening underneath it. Frank was at the kitchen table with his laptop and 2 legal pads. Marcus was in the backyard replacing a fence board that had been loose since August, because Marcus Webb did not know how to be useful in a house without finding something broken that needed fixing. Lily sat at the table doing homework, her own chair, her own table, a glass of orange juice at her elbow. Ordinary things that had cost her everything to get back. My phone rang at 9:41. "Mr. Holt, Patricia Keene, Northeast Life and Casualty. Routine annual review on your whole life policy account ending 7742. Your current beneficiary on file is Evelyn Marsh Holt." I set my coffee down very carefully. When was that change made? 14 months ago, through our online portal. 14 months ago, I was on a job in Connecticut. Evelyn was at home with access to my phone, my email, the password I had stored carelessly in my notes application. Someone had logged into my account and changed the beneficiary on my $300,000 life insurance policy from Lily to Evelyn. "Reverse it," I said. "Flag the account for unauthorized access. My attorney will be in touch today." Frank looked up from the legal pad. I told him. He wrote 3 words, and underlined them twice: identity theft. Federal offense. Unauthorized access to a financial account for beneficiary fraud violates the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, a federal statute carrying serious criminal penalties on top of the state-level charges we already had. He called his Nashville colleague within 4 minutes. 22 minutes later, Frank set the phone down. Her name is Eleanor, 78 years old, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Her granddaughter filed a complaint 2 years ago. Estate documents changed while Evelyn was providing what Eleanor called companionship. The complaint was closed. Insufficient evidence of a pattern. He looked at me. Until now. My colleague is driving to meet her this afternoon. Lily looked up from her textbook. Is she going to be okay? The woman in Tennessee, she's not alone anymore, I said. Frank's phone rang at 4:19. He listened 40 seconds, then looked at me with an expression I had not seen on him before: professional neutrality, genuinely surprised. She signed, he said. Eleanor held the notebook page for 30 seconds and said, "That's Evelyn's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. She used to leave me notes on my kitchen counter when I was having a hard week. She seemed like the kindest woman I had ever met." Frank looked at his legal pad. She asked me to pass along a message. She said, "Tell him I spent 2 years being afraid I'd imagined the whole thing. Now I know I didn't." I put both hands flat on the counter. "Tell her she didn't imagine anything," I said, "and tell her she's not alone in it." Tomorrow was Sunday. Every piece was in place. There would be time for everything else after. Before I reveal how the final trap snapped shut on them, comment "Justice" below to let me know you're still watching. And a quick heads up, the upcoming part contains intense drama and stylized elements adapted for storytelling. If this kind of intense family showdown isn't for you, feel free to stop the video right here. I had been standing at the living room window for 40 minutes when the car turned onto Crestwood Avenue. Frank was at the kitchen table with 2 stacks of documents arranged in the order he would use them. Marcus was on the front porch with a cup of coffee. Lily was next door at Bob's house with Melissa, which told me she understood more about what was coming than I had explicitly told her. The rental car pulled in at 2:47. Evelyn stepped out first, sunglasses, loose hair, the unhurried confidence of a woman returning to something she owned. Julian followed, looking at his phone. I opened the front door before she reached the steps. "Ray." The smile, warm, practiced hundreds of times, familiar. "I didn't know you were back. Inside," I said. "Both of you." Something recalibrated behind her eyes. Gone in under a second. She came inside. Julian stopped looking at his phone when he saw Frank stand up from the table. "Mrs. Marsh," Frank said. "Not Mrs. Holt." He set the first document on the table. Temporary restraining order, New York Supreme Court, October 16th. All joint accounts are frozen effective immediately. The performance held for 3 seconds. Then her chin dropped. Eyes softened, the vulnerability register deployed on schedule. "Ray, what is this? I don't understand." "Let him finish," I said. Frank set the second document beside the first. Emergency order of protection. Lily's name. Criminal penalties for violation. Then he placed the black notebook in the center of the table. The performance stopped. Completely. Instantly. Like a building losing power. Her hand moved to her throat. "Where did you get that?" "Flat. Every layer gone." "Left suitcase," I said. "Under the envelope." She measured me with eyes I had never seen before. Not warmth, not performance. The actual calculation of someone starting from zero. "Raymond, if we could sit down and discuss this like reasonable—" "Frank," I said. I walked to the porch. Marcus handed me a coffee. Black, no sugar. I wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the oak tree going gold in the October afternoon. I drank my coffee. I waited. I knew Evelyn would run before she did it. Not because I had predicted it specifically, not the taxi, not the cash, not the one-way ticket to Miami, but because I had watched her face when Frank set the notebook on the table, and I had seen the moment when she understood that there was no version of this conversation that ended in her favor. And I knew from 2 years of living alongside her that Evelyn Marsh's response to a situation with no favorable outcome was not to stay and negotiate. It was to find the exit and move toward it before anyone else located it first. Frank came out to the porch at 5:40. "She's asking to make a phone call," he said. "Let her," I said. At 6:15, a taxi came down Crestwood Avenue and stopped in front of the house. Evelyn came out through the front door with a carry-on bag, one bag small enough to fit under an airplane seat, packed with the speed of someone who has thought about this moment before and knows exactly what she needs. She did not look at me on the porch. She walked to the taxi, got in, and the taxi pulled away. She left Julian standing in the front hallway. I watched the taxi turn at the end of the street. Then I went inside and looked at Julian, who was 14 years old, and standing in a hallway with his phone in his hand, and an expression on his face that I had not seen from him before. Not the practiced flatness, not the casual cruelty, but something younger and more unguarded than any expression I had ever seen from him. The expression of a boy who has just been left. I did not say anything to him right then. There was nothing useful I could say. I called Frank's colleague who had been coordinating with law enforcement, and I told him where the taxi was headed. Evelyn's carry-on contained $14,000 in cash, rubber-banded, in the same practiced way as the envelope in the suitcase. Her ticket was a one-way flight to Miami departing at 8:15. She told the deputies there was a misunderstanding. There was not one. The rest of what happened did not happen quickly. Courts move on their own schedule, indifferent to how urgently any of the people involved need them to hurry. But they moved. That is what matters. Evelyn appeared before a Yonkers judge in February of 2025 on the full range of charges: conspiracy, financial fraud, and racketeering across 3 states. Her attorney argued difficult circumstances and outside influence. The judge looked at the bank statements. He looked at the 47 photographs. He looked at the photograph of a 16-year-old girl standing outside her own kitchen window on her birthday in 44-degree weather. Evelyn was convicted on 19 counts. 14 years. Julian was placed with a distant relative in Ohio. I thought about that more than I expected to. He had been raised inside the operation before he was old enough to choose whether he wanted to be. 14 years old is young enough for taught things to sometimes be untaught. I did not forgive what he had done to Lily, but I held a small, deliberate space for the possibility that he could become something different than what he had been made into. I drove home after the last court date on a Thursday afternoon in April. Crestwood Avenue looked the way it always looked. Ordinary quiet, the kind of street that does not announce itself. I parked in front of my house and sat in the truck for a moment. Then I went inside and called Lily. The call I made from the driveway that Thursday afternoon in April was not a long one. Lily answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, sweetheart. I'm in the driveway." A pause. "It's done. It's done." I heard her exhale, not dramatic, just a breath leaving a body that had been holding something for a very long time and had finally been given permission to put it down. "Come inside," she said. "I'll put the coffee on." What happened between April and October was not dramatic. It did not announce itself with anything as clear as a before and after. It happened the way most real things happen, gradually, in the ordinary accumulation of days that do not ask permission before they become something. Lily went back to Roosevelt High in the second week of April. Carol Simmons had rearranged the classroom seating without being asked, putting Lily's desk near the window where the light was good in the mornings. Jordan was waiting at the lunch table on the first day. Back looked up, moved her tray to make room, said finally, in the tone of someone whose patience had been thoroughly tested but had held. Lily sat down. They ate lunch. That was all, and that was everything. I repainted the kitchen in May. Lily spent 3 weeks with paint swatches spread across the table every evening, holding them up against the wall in different lights, looking for the one that Diane had pointed to in a catalog in 2019, and said in the casual way she said things that were not actually casual. That's what this kitchen should be. Morning fog. A blue-gray that changed with the hour and never looked exactly the same twice. Marcus came down from White Plains with roller brushes and breakfast sandwiches. Bob Garrett spent both days in a lawn chair in the backyard offering opinions on the trim color that nobody had solicited and everybody appreciated. Melissa drove down from Albany with a pot of chicken soup, not celebrating exactly, but acknowledging the way some things need to be acknowledged before you can move past them. Sunday evening, the kitchen was done. Lily stood at the window over the sink. The October light caught the new paint exactly right. She turned around and looked at me. "Dad," she said, "Mom would have liked this." My throat did what my throat does. I let it. Yeah, she really would have. By October, the house on Crestwood Avenue felt like itself again. Not like it had been before Diane died. Something different. Something that had been through the fire and was still standing, which is a different kind of solid than what you have before anything tests you. In some ways, a better one. Lily made the honor roll in October for the first time in 2 years. She told me at dinner like it was ordinary news. I told her I was proud. She said she knew she had always known even when things were hard. I passed her the bread because I did not trust my voice. Lily's 17th birthday was 2 weeks away. I had one thing left to do. October 14th. Lily's 17th birthday. I set the watch on the kitchen table between us, the one Diane had pressed into my palm 4 years ago. Lily picked it up with both hands and held it against her chest and cried the way you cry when something that was taken from you finally comes home. She put it on. She walked to the porch. She raised her hand one slow wave exactly like her mother. I turned off the engine and went back inside. These grandpa stories are not just about revenge. They are about what happens when a good man stops paying attention to the people he loves most. This is my family story, and I am not proud of every chapter. I was distracted by grief, by loneliness, by the comfort of believing what was easiest to believe. I missed things I should have seen. Don't be like me. Watch the small things. The child who says I'm fine in a voice that means the opposite. The chair nobody sits in anymore. I believe God brought me home early that October night for a reason. Some things are not coincidence. My personal belief, if you love someone, presence is not enough. You have to be paying attention. If this family story stayed with you, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if these grandpa stories speak to you, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than I can say. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted purely for meaningful storytelling. If that is not for you, no hard feelings at all. Step away and find the content that feeds your soul.